Getting a flu shot is always a good idea, and with COVID-19, it's even more important. Symptoms may be similar: fever, sore throat, cough, and fatigue, but having both viruses at once is possible and something to avoid, especially for older adults and people with certain medical conditions. Protect yourself and others. Geisinger makes flu shots easy with appointments, walk-ins, and drive-through options available, all at no cost to you. Find out more at geisinger.org/flu season.
And now, a word from Shauna Barnhart, Place Studies Director at Bucknell University.
Good morning and welcome to the 4th Annual Anthracite Economic Summit, a virtual convening. I'm Shauna Barnhart, Director of the Place Studies Program in Bucknell University's Center for Sustainability and the Environment. As part of that work, I manage the university's Coal-Region Field Station, a network of collaborations with over 20 organizations in eastern Northumberland County that works together on community-identified projects in revitalization, local histories and heritage, and future directions. Today's gathering is a partnership between the Chamber's 4th Annual Members' Choice Anthracite Economic Summit and a convening made possible through a campus compact of New York and Pennsylvania Regional Consortium mini-grant for community engagement. The Members' Choice Anthracite Economic Summit seeks to create partnerships for progress. The Campus Compact convening grants are intended to build higher education's capacity to deepen civic and community engagement and strengthen regional communities. By co-hosting this event, it is our goal to foster conversations that will allow us to build cross-sector partnerships between businesses, nonprofit organizations, local, state, and federal government, and universities for the purposes of downtown economic revitalization. Today's gathering is one in a series of meetings, workshops, and summits that have been convening in recent years, all geared towards revitalization in the coal region, with each building upon prior efforts. In May of 2019, the annual Members' Choice Anthracite Economic Summit and Campus Compact of New York and Pennsylvania Regional Consortium mini-grant for community engagement hosted the Economic Revitalization in the Lower Anthracite Coal Region convening. That event and the breakout sessions sparked the collaboration between the City of Shamokin and CEDACOG, creating a revitalization coordinator position, resulting in the new Go Shamokin plan that we will hear about today. The network's discussions and ideas from that summit, which in turn were building upon discussions from prior gatherings, continue to spark collaborations and action in the intervening 17 months, including with the Rebuilding Our Community workshop hosted in Shamokin in February of this year. These are just a few examples of the value of holding such gatherings, as the conversations and the breakout sessions sparked by our keynote speakers will continue to seed and drive change going forward. The planning for today's meeting was a collaborative effort between representatives from Greater Susquehanna Valley Chamber of Commerce, CEDACOG, Central Susquehanna Opportunities, Members' Choice Financial Credit Union, Bucknell University, and Bloomsburg University. Today, even though circumstances require us to meet in a virtual format, it is our hope and our goal that today's keynote speakers and the breakout sessions will lead to new and continued collaborations for revitalization throughout our region.
Greetings and a hearty good morning to each of you. I'm Bob Garrett, President and CEO and CFO of the Greater Susquehanna Valley Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of your Chamber of Commerce, please know that we're thrilled to have helped to convene today's summit. But we couldn't have done it without our team of hardworking and visionary friends and colleagues. By name, these individuals are Chris Berleth, the Executive Director of Leadership Susquehanna Valley and of Membership for our Chamber, Shauna Barnhart of Bucknell University, Carla Procopio of the Central Susquehanna Opportunities, Betsy Kramer of CEDACOG, Jim Barberich of Members' Choice Financial Credit Union, Susan Daria and Tim Pelton of Bloomsburg University. Thank you to each of those individuals. Events such as today's 4th Annual Anthracite Summit are intended to serve as idea factories. As with all factories, capital and investment are the key to survival. With this in mind, please let me give a heartfelt thanks to our sponsors for the investment that they made and for their willingness to take a risk on us that our commitment to the regeneration and revitalization of the communities of the lower anthracite region will have significant returns. Our executive sponsors are Geisinger, BB&T, Bruiser Sports Grill, and Burger King. Our grant sponsor is Campus Compact in coordination and support of Bucknell University and Bloomsburg University. So, as they may have said a few years ago at the Victoria Theater on Independence Street in Shamokin, let's get this show on the road. A reminder, please keep your computer or your device on mute. This really helps in keeping the background noise to a minimum, and it will spare you the embarrassment of all of us hearing your private conversations. This morning, I'm very, very pleased to introduce to you Richard Vegg, Pennsylvania's Acting Secretary of Banking and Securities. Prior to joining Governor Wolf's cabinet, he was the managing partner of Gabriel Investments and chaired the Woods Foundation, a nonprofit philanthropic organization. His roots and knowledge of the energy sector here in Pennsylvania run deep, as he was the co-founder and became the chairman and CEO of Energy Plus, a natural gas supply company now owned and operated by NRG Energy. On the financial services side, he co-founded 2 credit card companies, one of which became the largest Visa insurer in the entire industry. A writer, Secretary Vegg has authored 2 books that together chronicle the history and the events of 6 major previous world financial disasters, as well as another book which outlines new and better approaches for predicting and preventing future financial crises. A native of the Longhorn State, Secretary Vegg now generously shares his expertise with many important purely Pennsylvania enterprises, such as the board of the University of Pennsylvania, the trustees of Penn Medicine, the Innovations Advisory Board of the Abramson Cancer Center, and particularly exciting to me, he chairs Fringe Arts of Philadelphia. And finally, listen to this, he's on the governing board of the Institute for New Economic Thinking, something we can certainly embrace here. Secretary Vegg, a virtual welcome to Pennsylvania's anthracite coal region. We can't wait for the day that, hopefully sooner rather than later, we will be able to host you in downtown Shamokin or Coltmont or Mount Carmel or all 3 of those towns and show you true coal region hospitality and show to you that our best days lie just ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Richard Vegg.
What a great introduction. I hope I can live up to at least a little bit of it. Thank you, Bob Garrett, for the terrific job you do in putting this conference together and leading the region. We're enormously grateful for your leadership. I'm very pleased to be joining all of you for the 4th Annual Anthracite Economic Summit. I'd like to add my thanks to Bob's in recognizing the many great sponsors of this conference, Campus Compact of New York and Pennsylvania, Bucknell and Bloomsburg universities, and so many other great institutions. We couldn't be more grateful for your support. One of the keys to economic revitalization is collaboration. And frankly, the collaborative partnership you have built among universities, local leaders, and the community to bring this program to life and continue the work each year is a testament to the importance of rebuilding and revitalizing the region. I recently read a biography of Stephen Girard, one of our greatest Pennsylvanians, and he was making venture capital investments in Pennsylvania's anthracite coal region in the early 1800s, if you can imagine back that far. The coal era, filled with difficulties as well as victories, is a big part of what led America to the pinnacle of the Industrial Revolution. Who could have foreseen the changes from that very first anthracite mine in Pittston in 1775 to the world of today? I've been highly impressed with the achievements and dynamism of your region. Congratulations on being named Pennsylvania's Chamber of the Year. That reflects well on the terrific spirit and endless potential of the greater Susquehanna Valley region. As mentioned, as Bob was kind enough to mention, I serve as acting secretary for the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities. We supervise nearly 200 Pennsylvania banks, credit unions, and trusts. We license more than 20,000 non-bank consumer lenders, including mortgage companies, car dealers, money transmitters, and consumer discount companies. And we also license more than 200,000 investment firms and professionals. Additionally, we are actively engaged in consumer outreach and protection. We have programs across the state with senior citizens, with military personnel, with educational institutions, and on and on. The department is first and foremost a regulator, with the core focus on the safety and soundness of banks and other financial institutions and compliance with consumer lending laws. You know, it goes without saying that none of us could have predicted what the last 8 months would have in store. And what that has meant is that the department's regulatory mission of the strength and safety of our financial institutions, as well as our mission of helping to ensure consumers and businesses are well informed, are more important than ever. COVID-19 has required our agency and staff to pivot and adapt, as I know all of you have. For example, we now conduct all of our bank examinations remotely, virtually, if you can imagine that. It shows you how much the world has changed. I'm incredibly proud of our Department of Banking and Securities staff who remain steadfast in upholding the department's mission and vision in the face of these extraordinary circumstances. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the United States as a whole have been challenged to the core. As evidence of this, all 50 states and the District of Columbia saw a decrease in the gross domestic product in the second quarter of 2020. Pennsylvania saw a 34% decrease in quarter two over quarter one. Industries hit hard in Pennsylvania included durable goods, manufacturing, arts, recreation, and entertainment, and the accommodation and food service industry, which as we know, has been especially hard hit. During this summer, Pennsylvania's employment rate reached into the mid-teens. That's something that hasn't been true for almost 100 years. There is good news for the moment, though. Unemployment has come down to 10.3%, and the estimated number of Pennsylvanians working or looking for work was down 59,000 over the course of the most recent month. There have been steady gains in the number of non-farm jobs in Pennsylvania, with the largest volume of gains being seen in trade, transportation, and utilities. Now, I want to comment on financial institutions because of their particular role in the economy, especially in times of duress. Financial institutions continue to support economic development efforts through lending activities with a focus on serving and strengthening communities. There have been very noticeable increases in deposit growth. And frankly, there have also been very positive trends in the last 2 or 3 months on the percentage of loans in deferred status. I think our statistics reflect the nation's in that their loans in deferred status had reached, come in the neighborhood of 20%, and now are under 10%. And that's really evidence of the great job that everyone is doing pulling together in this time. And it also reflects the public's reliance on and confidence in its Pennsylvania banks. From our vantage point, I can assure you that Pennsylvania's banks and other financial institutions have stepped up to the challenge. Particularly in the face of an uncertain economic future, financial institutions are the lifeblood of an economy. Federal loan programs such as the U.S. Small Business Administration's Paycheck Protection Program, you've heard it referred to as the PPP program, have increased the total amount of outstanding loans at financial institutions across the state. The program was designed to provide direct incentives to small businesses to keep employees on the payroll, with SBA offering loan forgiveness if certain criteria are met. As of the end of August, banks originated more than 173,000 SBA-backed PPP loans, amounting to more than $20.7 billion in credit extended in Pennsylvania. In fact, Pennsylvania ranks 6th in terms of dollar amount and number of PPP loans. Pennsylvania's Attorney General Josh Shapiro early on launched the PA Care Package initiative, which partnered with banks and financial institutions to help Pennsylvanians impacted by COVID-19. This was a voluntary initiative provided for the expansion of the availability of certain loans, grace periods for mortgages and loans, and relief from certain fees. Financial institutions across Pennsylvania have worked diligently to help customers and their communities at a critical time in our history, offering modifications of loans, fee waivers, forbearances, and other deferred payment programs to meet the particular needs of individuals and businesses. All of these efforts have and will help spur economic recovery and offer strong testimony to the commitment of Pennsylvania's bankers to assist their customers and communities. Of course, there have been problems with the PPP program and the other myriad special programs launched in this pandemic. That's unfortunate, but it's the byproduct of the unprecedented speed and scale at which these programs were launched. Volumes of SBA loans grew tenfold in a matter of weeks, and it was inevitable that there would be some problems. Our department has worked shoulder to shoulder with the industry to work through many of these problems. The bottom line is that a lot of credit got to places of great need. There remains a lot of uncertainty about the full financial impact of the pandemic and the timeline for which those impacts will be felt. Those impacts will likely be concentrated to industries such as the service industry and transportation, and will not necessarily impact all geographic markets equally. There is support available through the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, the EIDL program, which provides eligible small businesses and agricultural businesses help with fixed debts, payroll, and other bills to help mitigate a disaster's impact. In addition to the loan programs being offered at the federal level, the state has also stepped up to provide loans through various programs to help businesses offset the financial impact of the pandemic. Secretary Davin and the entire staff of the Department of Community and Economic Development, who are collectively responsible for all of these state funding programs and more, have worked tirelessly to provide funding and resources to businesses and communities struggling with the impacts of the pandemic. $2.6 billion in federal stimulus through the CARES program came as part of the state budget this year. As part of CARES funding, $225 million was allocated for COVID-19 relief to small businesses through the distribution through the CDFIs, or Community Development Financial institutions. The COVID-19 Relief statewide small business assistance program helps small businesses cover their operating expenses during the shutdown and the reopening period. The PIDA, Pennsylvania's Industrial Development Authority, makes available low-interest loans and lines of credit for businesses that commit to creating and retaining full-time jobs for the development of industrial parks and multi-tenant facilities. The Community Development Block Grant enables eligible municipalities to apply for grants and technical assistance for community development activities that prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus, including public services, infrastructure improvements, and development and planning. The Emergency Solutions Grant is focused on homeless assistance and homelessness prevention for local governments and nonprofit organizations. So you can see from this list that Pennsylvania has been very busy working in the middle of an enormously difficult situation. And frankly, if any of these programs are ones you have more interest in, please let our department know and we can help you navigate your way to get more information. Looking towards the future, even as we slog through this pandemic, we need to look to the future. And your terrific organization has so effectively already been doing this. There are silver linings to the pandemic. You know, one of the things that it is doing is pushing us as communities, as a state, as a nation, headlong into the digital future. You know, I would suspect we all have enormously greater skills in handling things remotely and virtually, and those skills will persist and those changes will persist even after the pandemic. It has also been a boost to the superb work of our medical profession, including our medical researches. Count on the fact that when the global solution are reached in testing, treatment, and vaccines, Pennsylvania's powerhouse medical firms will be part of that story. Just a few days ago, I happened to be in a small group that was briefed about a new test being developed at Penn, which, you know, there's no certainty this will happen, but it looks like this will come forward in the not too distant future. The cost will be 7 cents per test, and the results will come back in 3 minutes. Can you imagine the benefit to the workings of the state, to the social life of the state, to every aspect of Pennsylvania if this were to be widely deployed? Banks will also be a big part of this recovery. As we continue to navigate the challenges ahead, I believe we'll continue to see the aggressive adoption of digital technologies by both consumers and industries. You know, and we've seen, frankly, not just the shift to digital technologies, but a shift away from traditional branches. We've had a number of banks close certain branches just because habits have changed so radically in this situation. According to a new report by Fitch Ratings, banks will face increased competition, putting pressure, you know, from the technology community, putting pressure on them to grow their own technology. So banks will need to invest a great deal more in the digital front. Like many industries, we need to focus on developing a new pipeline of talent. You know, your organization is all about developing for the future, and you've done such a wonderful job in that respect. The banking industry is busy in that regard as well. Our department has partnered with the Pennsylvania Bankers Association and the Pennsylvania Association of Community Bankers for the past 2 years on its Next Gen Bankers Academy, which has been a great success. Another opportunity for students who are curious about a future career in finance is the Conference of State Bank Supervisors Community Bank Case Study Competition. Pennsylvania schools have historically had a very strong showing in the number of teams participating in the competition, including Bloomsburg University and Susquehanna University, two of the schools in the region. Last year, a Pennsylvania college took first place. That's across the nation. And this year, Pennsylvania has 11 teams from 10 Pennsylvania colleges and universities participating, with one of those teams nabbing third place. Both of these programs are like many conducted throughout Pennsylvania that are training our young to be dynamic business leaders. They both offer a glimpse into community banking and into leadership and into the future. So we've talked about COVID and we've talked about its impact on business, and we've talked about some of the silver linings of this pandemic. There's another silver lining to this pandemic that I would be remiss if I did not mention. It has given us all a chance to focus on what matters most, on family, on friends, and on our health and well-being. Frankly, with persistence and resiliency, Pennsylvania could emerge from this crisis stronger than ever, with better businesses, with stronger families and friendships, with a better sense of ourselves. If we do, it will be due to the terrific efforts of the people at today's conference and to all your colleagues across the state. So let me end my comments with one of my favorite quotes. It's from the silent movie star Mary Pickford, one of Hollywood's first true superstars, who became a millionaire many times over. She said, "If you have made mistakes, even serious mistakes, you may have a fresh start at any moment you choose. For this thing we call failure is not the falling down, but the staying down." Especially during a crisis like the one we now face, it is crucial that we keep this uppermost in our hearts and minds. This thing we call failure is not the falling down, but the staying down. Thank you again, Bob Garrett, and all the terrific sponsors of today's event. It's been a real privilege to be with you here today.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. This is Chris Berleth from the Chamber. We're so glad to have you. At this point, we're going to transition into a question and answer period. For all of you participants attending, please feel free to make use of our chat feature, and I'll happily read those off to you, Mr. Secretary, so that you don't have to try to follow that along as they come in. Before we proceed with the chat feature of the Q&A, I did receive a couple of questions in advance that I thought I'd prompt you with, and wanted to reflect on your ending comments there. In Shamokin, in Mount Carmel, and in Culpmont, in the lower Anthracite region in Northumberland County, we're anxious to have a plan to move forward so that when we can get back into meeting together in person, we can have used this time as an adequate time for research and best practices so that we can really launch well as we get back into the full participation of the community. In your biography, Bob shared that you're a venture capitalist in your past, and my first question is, as a venture capitalist, what are the things you look at when you invest in a community?
Well, first of all, I would say I'm not surprised to hear that you guys are already planning for the future. That's your reputation. You guys do a great job in that regard. When we, our investments aren't really geography specific. And I think that that's probably true of many of our colleagues as well. We have invested in businesses across the state in my career as a venture capitalist. And it's not the geography as much as it is the power of the idea and the resiliency or determination of the management. And I would say, in a place like the greater Susquehanna Valley, you have certain advantages that actually would be appealing to investors. You have lower operating costs than many of the large cities would have. So I don't think anyone has to be timid at all about putting their hand up and reaching out for venture capital from places like New York and Philadelphia and DC. And I would encourage folks to do that.
That's great. Thank you. I have another one here. Are there programs that the Department of Banking offers to assist lenders in meeting risk requirements, specifically with regard to the collateral value of properties in depressed areas or blighted areas?
Yeah, the department as such does not provide that. That would be a little bit of a conflict, that if we were examining you for risk practices and advising you for risk practices. However, we have two great trade associations, the Pennsylvania's Bankers Association and the Pennsylvania Association of Community Bankers. And we work with those folks all the time. We have the CSBS, which is a national organization of state bankers. And all of those organizations have plenty of training on that very critical subject. So, they're in lending, there's no area of lending that is larger than real estate lending. And there's no area of real estate lending more important than understanding evaluation of collateral. So we applaud you for thinking about that subject.
Our next question is from Lauren Bryson with Focus Central Pennsylvania. In addition to those programs and projects mentioned, are there any other innovative initiatives in Pennsylvania available or perhaps in planning stages to encourage investment in Pennsylvania that reduces investors' risks and increases the speed of their projects?
Well, I'd say to you that there is nothing going on inside of Pennsylvania state government these days that is not, super high focused on how we can incent new capital to the region, how we can help launch new businesses, how we can help assist businesses in recovering. So there's not a meeting I'm in that isn't dominated by that kind of a discussion. So I'd say two things. One is, I think I've given you a pretty comprehensive list of programs. And if you would like help in navigating those programs or want to talk to DCED or our staff more about those, just please reach out and we'll set that up. The second thing that I would say is, if you have ideas of new programs, we'd love to hear them. We know that we'd love to hear them. We know DCED would love to hear them. I've been visiting with, our state's great senators over the last month or so in particular. And it's hard to find somebody who isn't, racking their brain to try to come up with new ways to provide assistance. So if you have suggestions for us, we'd love to hear them.
I love to hear you say that, because one of the things we're going to be doing after our Q&A will be breakout sessions for exactly that. But before we do that, of course, let me continue with the questions here from our participants. From Justin Strasser, who's a reporter with the Daily Item. He says, the anthracite area has seen a difficult economic time even before the pandemic. How do places like this across the state recover from the pandemic when they've been struggling for years?
Well, that's a question that's relevant not just for your region, but for many areas across the country. And, I happen to think it's about as important a subject as you could have. And, my own sense is, I'll comment first about the chamber organization, the Greater Susquehanna Valley Chamber. You're already doing a number of important things. subjects like high-speed internet, 5G, things like that are going to be important for folks to operate remotely. I think this is a real opportunity. We have seen a surprising movement out towards rural areas and suburbs because of the pandemic. So I think this is a real opportunity for you guys to grab some of that sentiment. You're going to have folks moving to your areas that you didn't otherwise. You're going to have opportunities you didn't otherwise. And I think you should grab onto that. I also think that there is a lot of responsibility that devolves upon the federal government. The federal government is the place where most of the funding is for this kind of thing. And I hope that we see a resurgence in support. Frankly, personally, I hope we see a CARES 2 type of a support that would be available for states and local governments and for the citizens across the Commonwealth. I think it's a time to redouble your efforts that you so well point out in your question.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Any other questions here? I don't see any more in the chat. Give just a moment here.
Hey, Chris, are you open to a question verbally, or does it have to be in the chat?
Absolutely.
Thanks, Chris. Secretary Vague, Bob Garrett, the deep voice man in your introduction. It's good to see you, and welcome to Shamokin, Coldmont, Mount Carmel, and the greater Susquehanna Valley. I was intrigued that you kicked off your presentation with some references to Stephen Girard, the financier of the United States of America. In fact, he personally got us out of debt after the War of 1812. You know, we find ourselves in the midst of a pandemic, and pretty much like clockwork, these pandemics seem to come around about every 100 years or so. We've studied very carefully the pandemic of 1918, 1919 that created or ushered in the roaring 20s that we hear so much about, with their flappers and a huge economic growth. But a little bit more than 100 years before that was the pandemic of the late 1700s, or what we refer to now as the yellow flu or the yellow fever pandemic. And Stephen Girard sort of distinguished himself at that time because while all the other wealthy and rich folks were leaving Philadelphia, in his case, and getting out of the city, he stayed behind and took care of the sick and the dying from yellow fever. We in the greater Susquehanna Valley, and we talked about this quite a bit at this morning's chamber board meeting, are seeing a significant influx of people that are now leaving places like Philadelphia, New York, Baltimore, Boston, and getting out of there, and sort of because of virtual technology, are not planning to go back. They're going to stay in the greater Susquehanna Valley. So it's very important that we advocate for broadband and high-speed internet, those sort of things. But I guess what I'm getting to is, that's all introduction to my question is when you think of the Stephen Girards of the 2020s, who are those folks in Pennsylvania? Who are those folks that we might tap on the shoulder and say, hey, we have this real gem called the Anthracite Coal Region, where you can literally buy low and sell high with just a little bit of vision. How do we get access to those folks? How do we work with you, with the governor, with the Department of Banking and Securities to get access to that kind of private capital, not just the CARES funding, but the private capital to invest what we believe is going to be a very bright future for the coal region?
Well, first of all, I'm very impressed with your knowledge of history. I love history myself, and you show an impressive command of that. And Stephen Girard is one of those guys that the more you learn about him, the more impressive he seems. So thanks for those comments. Yeah, I from what I know about you guys, you guys are dynamic, and there are a lot of places around the state, and usually they're early, what are called early stage investment conferences. The Ben Franklin Network. It's the kind of conferences they hold and participate in. And I think there's room for you guys to lead an effort on behalf of your region to take some of your companies that are, eligible or looking for capital and kind of get on the circuit. Get on the circuit in Pittsburgh, in Philadelphia, frankly, get on the circuit in New York. I can tell you from my venture capital experience, it's hard. It's like finding the needle in the haystack to find those great investment opportunities. So the easier you can make it on those investors, like once or twice a year, going to Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and other areas, bringing along your companies that are seeking this kind of investment, you're going to be welcome. Folks are going to want to hear your story. I think there's an opportunity for you because everyone recognizes this trend of movement towards rural areas and suburbs. And I think folks want to capitalize on that.
So what we're going to do for just a moment, if you'll indulge me, is I'd like to go to each of our group facilitators and put you on the spot for a moment and ask you to talk about a couple of key highlights from your discussion. So perhaps Paula, if we could start with you.
Sure. So we talked, a lot in our group discussion. It was very interesting. And I think the big takeaway, if I could summarize it, is that it seems like a lot of the progress that's being made moving forward is going to be at the micro individual level or the community level, such as because one of the things that came up early was about the idea of the comps. And so just, to continue working towards that, but about also building communication bridges between the gaps between small businesses as well as bankers. But we also talked a lot about, how several in the discussion were pleased that Secretary Bay had mentioned the importance of investing in technology and in including younger generations, because that seems to be, the direction of how you can help build community and create a sense of pride, especially for new investors who can, can come in, can see that within the community. The other thing that we had talked about was just about better marketing, especially thinking about the tourism side of the economy, as far as, being creative about like how you can think about different commercial uses that's tourism generated, such as maybe like an ATV rental store or off-roading or like some kind of trout fishing that's put together, or even just, promoting things like having a, dining and accommodations and that sort of thing. And also looking into investing in the infrastructure of the coal region.
So I'm hearing you say key businesses would help elevate the comp, strategic recruitment of businesses, which I think goes along pretty well with what we've heard in the Faith Alliance for Revitalization's discussion about some economic development, economic revitalization for the downtowns. And then investing in technology, which certainly should be music to the ears of folks like Al Quimby from Penn Teledata, who's joined us today. Thanks so much. Those are some great thoughts, Paul. I really appreciate it. Joanne Troutman, can I ask you to go next? Key thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Chris. We talked about a lot of those same things, the importance of investing in technology and how we need to really change the image of the community as one that's high tech, as opposed to kind of a place where you go to escape, but rather you can kind of live here and have a successful business. We talked about the importance of investment and just how we present the community with, the potential that exists. We acknowledge that the comps or lack of comps sort of is a problem, but how do we sell the potential? Conversation centered around AOAA and sort of the gradual and grassroots system, and in the connectedness of the economy around supporting that, like, the hotels, B&Bs, Airbnbs that are popping up, restaurants and coffee shops that are seeing some success already from AOAA, and the move to AOAA being able to come into town on their four-wheelers and vehicles every weekend, and not just during special occasions. We did talk about the importance, again, of high-speed internet, the digital divide, and addressing that, and addressing those in more rural parts of our community. And it was shared in the group that there is some renewed effort around addressing blight. We all recognize what a huge problem blight is in the community, and that being the face of sort of the coal region. And when people say coal region, is it automatically negative connotation and rather than a positive? And how do we turn that around? And one of the comments was that I really loved is sort of right size the community for what we have now versus what the community had 50 years ago, and making sure that the infrastructure sort of reflects that. So it was a really good conversation. Again, lots of conversation about technology and having the infrastructure we need to support industry.
Great, thank you very much, Joanne. Vanessa, can I ask you to share?
Yes, absolutely. So our discussion covered a lot of the things that Paula and Joanne just brought up. And so I'll maybe just add a couple other pieces that were maybe a little different. We did have a lot of the similar discussions around kind of comp evaluations of buildings and businesses, and the issues around blight as well, and AOAA, and some of the so some other things that came up were just issues of sort of having enough like data and information for investors. And then we also talked a bit about the things that came up in the keynote, right, about silver linings coming out of the pandemic, and a sort of renewed attention and attraction to this area and maybe rural areas. In general, we kind of talked about Jim Thorpe as a sort of comparable example for the direction of this region. And another thing that I think came up that was unique in our discussion is the importance of a kind of openness to outside input and changes, right? Specifically, as we were talking about, what does the sort of branding of the coal region look like, and how do you get that kind of like insight and perspective that I think some of that our discussion was kind of also thinking about the ways that that needs a certain kind of outside perspective or outside consultation.
Great, thank you very much, Vanessa.
Thanks.
So needing more data, needing more information, comparing to Jim Thorpe. While I certainly appreciated Secretary Vague's flattery toward the chamber, the purpose of this event is specifically to get as many partners and community organizations to the table as humanly possible, especially for the purpose of understanding one another's opportunities and barriers so that we can help one another. So I especially appreciate the hard work done in the breakout sessions. I know that this is certainly not a light topic, but I think it's an important one that we have to talk more about, because if we're looking at fighting blight, well, from a developer side, they need access to capital, and access to capital always requires an assessment of risk on the lender side, and we need to look at what are the risks that lenders are inherently up against. So appreciate the time we had to talk about this. I think, unless there's any remarks from our committee members, Shauna, do you have anything to share?
No, I just want to thank everyone for participating in the breakouts and being really thoughtful, in your comments and with the questions. And what we're going to do actually with the breakouts, as you know, they were recorded, and then we're going to be doing summaries from those so that we can put together an after action report, so that those conversations are not lost and that we can build on action going forward based on the key themes. that came out across the session. So I just wanted to let everybody know, just remind everybody that, that it wasn't just a talking exercise, but we're actually going to collect that information and summarize it and try and get some action around some of the ideas that came out of it.
Sean. Tim, anything to share?
No, I think that what Shauna just said was important. I want to make sure that everybody realizes that nothing's going to be lost. We have one young gentleman who's going to pour over these and pull out all the information that's crucial, and it'll all be packaged and ready to go.
Thanks, Tim. Betsy, anything for you?
Sorry, just unmuting myself. No, we had a really good discussion during the breakout session. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this afternoon.
Great. And Jim Barberich, any final thoughts, anything to share? I know Jim had an issue with audio earlier.
Hey, how does that sound?
Perfect.
Getting to work the
Great. Yep.
Great. So I thought it was great. The secretary, I thought it was great to have him lead. He said a lot of things that were encouraging to me. I think he gets it. I think he understands what some of the challenges are. He downplayed his fact that he's a venture capitalist, but clearly that came out in his talk. I think that things like he talked about PPP, which are, there'll be a second level. I think we all will in our industry understand better the second round and be better prepared to maximize those opportunities for people in our region. And I think the discussion with everybody brought some great insight from different perspectives that all go to formulating the solution. And I'm the ultimate optimist, and I'm excited about the opportunities that are in front of us.
Great. Thanks, Jim. All right. So at 1 o'clock, we're gonna dismiss here now. But at 1 o'clock to 1:30, we're gonna have considerably more fun in trying to figure out some trivia about the coal region. Trivia, not trivia. Trivia denotes that it's trivial, but I think it's really great. There's some great history questions. We're going to do a quiz. We're going to have some fun trying to brainstorm together, get to know one another a little bit, and figure out just how much we claim to know about the coal region. So tune in from 1 to 1:30. There'll be a survey that's part of it. If you're in the group that gets the best score, you win some prizes. So with that, please enjoy some time, enjoy your lunch, walk away, and then come back energized and ready to game it out at 1 o'clock. Thanks, everybody, and look forward to seeing you later.
See ya.